I was still holding the ring when he said it. 5 minutes. That's how long I had left before they wheeled me into the OR. The hallway on the fourth floor smelled like antiseptic and recycled air, and I was lying on that narrow gurney in the green hospital gown that didn't tie right in the back, the IV in my left arm, the fluorescent lights humming above my head. I'd taken off my wedding ring a few minutes earlier, the way the anesthesiologist asked, no metal, nothing that could interfere with the equipment, and I'd placed it in his hand, my husband's hand, Marcus's hand. He was standing beside the gurney, and I was holding his hand with the 2 fingers the IV left free, and I was scared. Not the kind of scared you tell people about, the quiet kind. The kind that builds up over 8 months of hearing words like staging and margins and treatment protocol, and learning that those words carry a weight that doesn't fit in ordinary conversation. I was scared I wasn't going to wake up, and the only thing I wanted in that hallway was to feel my husband's hand. That's when he spoke. "Renee, I need to tell you something before you go in." His voice was different. I heard that before I understood what I was hearing. 16 years beside a person teaches you to listen for what they're not saying, and Marcus's voice in that moment had a quality I had never heard in it before. Not anger, not sadness, relief. The relief of someone who is finally about to put down a weight they've been carrying alone for too long. I can't do this anymore. I want a divorce. I'm in love with Denise. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I didn't pull the IV out of my arm or sit up on the gurney or do any of the things a person with a pulse would normally do. I went completely still, looking at the ring sitting in his palm, the ring I had just taken off my finger and placed there for him to hold while I went into the surgery that might be the last thing I ever did. Denise, my sister, my older sister, who had moved into our house 3 months earlier to help me through treatment. I heard the OR doors open. I heard the anesthesiologist say it was time. I looked one last time at Marcus, at the ring in his hand, at his eyes that couldn't hold mine, and I said the only thing I said, with a calm I still don't know how to explain. "Okay, we'll talk when I wake up." And I went in. But for you to understand the size of what I lost in that hallway, I need to tell you who Denise was to me. My name is Renee. I'm 37 years old. I'm a licensed CPA, and I run my own small accounting firm out of Raleigh, North Carolina, where I've lived for the past 14 years. I built that business from scratch. First just me and a part-time bookkeeper, then a real office, then 3 full-time staff. I've spent my career helping people protect what they worked hard to build. I know better than most that you have to pay attention to the numbers because the numbers always tell the truth eventually. I would need that lesson more than I'd ever needed anything in my life. Denise and I grew up in Greensboro, about an hour and a half west of Raleigh. Our mom, Miss Gloria, raised us both after our dad left when I was 8, and Denise was 13. She worked 2 jobs for years. Days at the school district, evenings at a dry cleaner on Battleground Avenue, and she did it without complaining, which meant that Denise and I learned early that you handle what's in front of you and you don't fall apart. Denise was 5 years older than me, and for a long time that meant she was the first adult I had. She was the one who explained things our mom didn't have time to explain. The one who sat with me at the kitchen table the night before the SAT and drilled vocabulary words until midnight. The one who drove 3 hours from Charlotte to Greensboro the night my high school boyfriend broke my heart at 17, knocked on the door at 11 p.m. with a pint of butter pecan ice cream, sat on my bedroom floor, and didn't say a word until I was ready to talk. There's one memory I keep coming back to whenever I think about her. It was a Sunday afternoon in October of 2004. I was 14, and I'd just gotten cut from the junior varsity volleyball team, the first time I'd ever been cut from anything. I came home and sat on the back porch steps and didn't move for 2 hours. Denise found me there when she got home from work. She sat down next to me, didn't ask what happened, didn't offer advice. She just sat there until I said, finally, "I got cut." She was quiet for a moment. Then she said, "Okay, then next year you make it." That was it. No false comfort, no speech, just the assumption that I was going to get back up, stated so plainly it became true. I spent 23 years believing she was the one person in the world who would always be on my side. Marcus I met in 2012 at a housewarming party in Raleigh. He was a civil engineer, 43 now, worked for a firm that handled infrastructure projects across the state. He was steady in the way that some people are steady. Not exciting exactly, but solid, reliable, the kind of man who follows through. He had a hard time with emotional conversations, tended to go quiet when things got heavy, would rather wait out a problem than face it directly, but he was mine. And the house we owned together in North Raleigh, 4 bedrooms, the backyard garden I'd spent 3 summers building, the kitchen we'd renovated together the year before the diagnosis, was the most concrete proof of what we'd built. I didn't know yet that I was counting down the last days when I could trust both of them. If you haven't subscribed yet, this is the moment, because this story is going to show you that there is a betrayal that hurts differently than any other, not when it comes from a stranger, not when it comes from a friend, but when it comes from the person who slept in the room next to yours your entire childhood. Write in the comments, "A real sister doesn't do this." And tell me, has someone who was supposed to protect you ever been the one who hurt you most? The first sign came in November of 2022, about 3 weeks after the diagnosis. The diagnosis arrived in late October. Breast cancer, stage 2, treatable but requiring a long protocol. Surgery, chemo, radiation. The first call I made walking out of the oncologist's office, still holding the folder of paperwork, was to Denise. She picked up on the second ring, and she cried harder than I did. Marcus handled it the way he handled everything hard. He got busy. He researched oncologists, built spreadsheets comparing treatment plans, handled the insurance calls. It was his way of caring. But at night, when what I needed wasn't logistics, but presence, he wasn't always there in the way I needed. There was a distance in him that the diagnosis made wider instead of smaller. I told Denise everything. I told her I sometimes felt alone, even with him in the same room. I told her I was afraid of asking too much of him. I told her his specific fears: death, long illness, not knowing what to say, the fears I knew after 16 years. I told her the exact shape of his vulnerability. I was drawing her a map. I didn't know it. Denise lived in Charlotte, about 2.5 hours from Raleigh. She was a human resources manager at a logistics company there, had been with a man named Craig for going on 3 years. In November, she drove up for what she called a support weekend. She arrived with a bag that was bigger than you'd pack for 2 days. And I didn't think anything of it. The Saturday morning of that visit, I woke up early. Treatment disrupts sleep in ways no one warns you about, and came downstairs. Marcus and Denise were sitting at the kitchen table. 2 mugs of coffee, the back door cracked, the gray November light coming in at an angle. Nothing wrong with the scene, but there was something in how they were sitting, a comfort in the silence between them that made me pause in the doorway for just a second before I walked in. "Morning," I said. They both turned at the same time. I didn't pay attention because I didn't want to. I had cancer. I had other things to worry about. The second sign came in January of 2023. I was in my second round of chemotherapy, and there were days I could barely get out of bed. Denise had gone back to Charlotte after that first visit, but she called every day, sometimes twice, which felt like love at the time, which I told my friends at the firm was proof I had the most devoted sister in the world. On one of those calls, she asked me about Marcus in a way that snagged on something I couldn't name. "How is he doing? Like, emotionally?" "I think okay," I said. "Why?" "No reason. It's just a lot being the caregiver. I wanted to make sure he had support." I said Marcus was strong, that he was holding up. And then I told her, because I told her everything, that he'd been getting quieter than usual, that the chemo was surfacing a distance between us that had always been there but now felt impossible to ignore. I told her about an argument we'd had the week before, about feeling like I was carrying the fear alone. I told her about the parts of our marriage that were fraying. I was handing her the exact details she needed. I didn't know it yet. The third sign came in February of 2023. Denise called on a Wednesday evening to tell me she'd ended things with Craig. I went straight into older sister mode, asked what happened, told her she deserved better, offered to have her come stay in Raleigh for a while if she needed a change. She went quiet for a moment and said, "Actually, I was thinking about asking if I could stay with you for a bit, at least while you're still in treatment, so I can actually help." "You don't have to do that," I said. "I want to." I know now that the end with Craig wasn't sudden. I know now it was preparation. But in that moment, I heard only a sister's love, and I cried in the bathroom after I hung up, out of pure gratitude. She moved into our house in early March of 2023, came with 2 suitcases and the manner of someone who wasn't planning a specific departure date. She took the guest room at the end of the hall, started cooking, doing grocery runs, being present in a way that I, exhausted, nauseated, losing my hair in fistfuls on the pillow, received as the greatest gift anyone had ever given me. The fourth sign I only recognized weeks later, but it happened on an afternoon in April. I'd come home from a chemo session and gone straight to bed. I fell asleep fast, the heavy, dreamless way the treatment made me sleep. I woke up about 2 hours later, thirsty, and went downstairs for water. The door to the back hallway was partly open, and I heard voices from the back porch. Marcus's voice and Denise's voice. Low voices. The kind you use when a conversation is private, not the kind you use when you're just filling time. I got my water and went back upstairs. I lay there in the dark and thought, they're bonding because of me. They're finding their way to each other through what I'm going through. That's good. That's what I needed to happen. I convinced myself it was love, their love for me. But there's a flashback that I've carried with me since long before any of this. It was at a family dinner in Greensboro in the summer of 2021. Marcus had said, quietly and without accusation, that he sometimes felt like he disappeared inside our marriage. Not a complaint exactly, more an observation. Said in the offhand way, he said things he didn't know how to say directly. I changed the subject. Denise held her eyes on him for a beat longer than necessary. At the time, I thought it was empathy. Now I know it was someone taking notes. There's another one. An evening in September of 2022, maybe 6 weeks before the diagnosis, Denise had asked me out of nowhere, mid-conversation about something else entirely, what Marcus's favorite restaurant in Raleigh was. I told her without thinking. She said, "Oh, that's nice," and moved on. 4 months later, when she was living in my house, I saw her come home one night with a takeout bag from that restaurant. She had eaten there with him while I was sleeping off the medication. And I, who had spent 14 years building a business on the principle that the numbers always tell the truth, had not been able to read the numbers that were lying right in front of me inside my own house. The surgery was scheduled for a Thursday in May of 2023. The night before, Denise made dinner. She made chicken and dumplings. The dish she'd known since we were children was my comfort food, the thing our grandmother used to make on cold Sundays in Greensboro. She set candles on the table. Marcus opened a bottle of wine I couldn't drink because of the medication, but I held the glass by the stem for a few minutes just to feel the weight of a normal evening. "Tomorrow is going to go fine," Denise said, smiling at me across the table. I believed her with my whole heart. After dinner, when Denise went to do the dishes and Marcus stepped out to the garage, I passed through the kitchen and saw her phone face up on the counter, screen lit. I wasn't looking for anything, but the name on the last notification was Marcus's name. I should have picked it up and read it. I didn't. I went to bed with a tightness in my chest that I blamed on pre-surgery nerves, and the next morning, I went to the hospital with both of them beside me, Marcus holding my right hand, Denise holding my left, the three of us walking in like a family. In the hallway outside the OR, before they took me in, the anesthesiologist asked me to remove my jewelry. I took off my earrings and put them in Denise's purse. I took off my wedding ring and put it in Marcus's hand. And that's when he told me he wanted a divorce. I went into surgery without the ring and without the marriage. What I carried into that room was something I wouldn't find words for until months later. The certainty that 2 losses were happening at the same time, and the second one was much larger than the first. I wasn't just losing a husband. I was losing a sister. I was losing the version of myself that had spent 37 years believing there was one person in the world who would never be capable of this. That was when I understood. I wasn't losing a man. I was losing the sister who had never existed. Before I tell you what happened when I woke up, tell me something in the comments first. Could you have stayed quiet in that hallway? Because I still ask myself that question. And don't forget to subscribe. This story isn't over, and what comes next is what changed everything. I woke up 4 hours and 20 minutes after surgery. The first thing I saw was the recovery room ceiling. The second thing I saw was Sonia. Sonia has been my best friend since we were both 22 years old, living in the same apartment complex in Raleigh the first year out of college, bonded initially over a broken washing machine in the laundry room and then over everything else. She is a high school history teacher in Wake County. She is the godmother of our friend Dana's daughter, and she has known me well enough for 15 years to understand that I would rather hear a hard truth than a comfortable lie. Sonia was not perfect in what came before. She had made the mistake, months earlier, of telling me that Denise gave her a feeling she couldn't explain. Something off, she'd said. something she noticed but couldn't name. I had told her she was overthinking it. I had told her Denise was the same Denise she'd always been, that the diagnosis was making everyone anxious, including me. Sonia had dropped it, but she had not forgotten what she'd seen. She was sitting in the chair beside my bed, and her eyes said clearly that she had been crying. "Where's Marcus?" I asked. My voice came out rough, the way it always does after general anesthesia. "He left," she said, slow and careful. "He left a note." I closed my eyes. "And Denise?" Sonia took a beat. "Also gone." Then she told me. She'd arrived at the hospital just before they took me into the OR. She'd driven over from school during her planning period to check on me, not knowing what had just happened in the hallway. Marcus was already gone, but Denise was still there. She was in the corridor, walking toward the elevators, phone already in her hand, typing as she walked, and smiling. Not the smile of someone who had just left her sister to go into surgery scared and alone. The smile of someone sending a message to a person who'd been waiting for news. Sonia stood there looking at that smile and felt something she couldn't name. She took out her phone and recorded it. 5 seconds. The hallway, Denise's back, the smile in profile. She didn't know yet that those 5 seconds were going to matter. Lying in that recovery bed, IV in my arm, the incision still burning under the bandaging, I made the first clear decision I'd made since the hallway that morning. I was not going to react. Not yet. I was going to let both of them believe I was too broken to act. I was going to use the one resource a woman who has spent 8 months in treatment has in abundance: the patience of someone who has learned to wait. Marcus had called 26 times that day. I didn't answer any of them. Denise had sent 31 texts. I didn't read them that day. I was in recovery for 2 days and in the hospital room for 4 more. During those 6 days, I did 3 things in silence. The first, I asked Sonia to find me a lawyer. She knew one through her brother-in-law, a family law attorney who practiced in Raleigh, specializing in divorce and marital property. She got him on the phone for me the second day of my stay. I laid out everything. He asked specific questions about the house. We'd bought it jointly in 2015, titled as Tenants in Common, about our bank accounts, about what was in whose name. He told me my position was solid and that documentation would help. The second, I asked Sonia to go to the house with the spare key she'd had since I started treatment, just in case, I'd said when I gave it to her, not knowing what case would arise. She went while I was still in the hospital. Marcus had taken his things. Denise had taken her things. The house was empty of people, but full of everything I had built. The furniture, the garden still blooming through the back windows, the kitchen we'd renovated, and the framed photograph of Denise and me at the North Carolina State Fair, taken in October of 2020, which Denise had printed and framed herself, mailed to me in a padded envelope with a note that said she wanted me to have it up somewhere I'd see it every day. Sonia took the frame off the mantel and brought it to the hospital. She set it on the bedside table without saying anything. I looked at that photograph, me at 34, Denise at 39, arms around each other, midway lights behind us, and understood that I wasn't looking at the past. I was looking at the set she had built, the devoted sister, the sister who came to help. The sister who framed a photo and put it on your mantle so you would remember every single day how much she loved you. The photo was a prop. The third thing I did during those 6 days, I wrote everything down. Not to process it, to document it. Dates, conversations I remembered with precision, the dinner the night before surgery, the calls from Denise asking about Marcus's emotional state, the restaurant, the unlocked phone on the counter. Sonia had preserved the 5 seconds of footage from the hallway. I had months of text messages on my phone, conversations where Denise asked about the marriage, about Marcus's weaknesses, about what I felt was missing. It was a map. She had drawn the map using my own words, and now I was using that map. On the 6th day, Marcus appeared in my room, unannounced, without asking if I wanted to see him. He came in with the expression of someone who had convinced himself that the guilty party can make it right with the right explanation. "I needed to see you," he said. "I know," I said. "Renee, I didn't plan any of this. It just happened. I hate that it happened the way it did, but—" "Marcus," I said, quietly enough that he stopped mid-sentence. "You can send the house documents to Alan Marsh. He already has everything. This week if you can." He looked at me. "You already have a lawyer." Since the second day I was in here. He left without saying anything else. The conversation with Denise didn't happen that day. It happened 3 weeks later, when I was back in the house, my house, legally ours, that she had walked out of with nothing but her suitcases, and she texted asking if we could talk. I said yes. We got on the phone. She started with, "I know there's nothing I can say," and I let her talk. I let her say everything she had prepared. I listened to every word the way you listen when you're cataloging, not when you're hurting. And when she finished, I said only this: "Denise, you came to my house to take care of me while I went through chemotherapy, and you used that time to build a relationship with my husband. That's not a mistake. That's a choice. And I don't have anything to discuss with you about choices you've already made." Silence. "Take care of yourself," I said, and I hung up. In the months that followed, the consequences arrived, not as fate's punishment, but as the direct and logical result of what the two of them had built on top of lies. The first, Marcus found out through a mutual contact in Charlotte that Denise had stayed in contact with Craig, the man she'd said she'd ended things with, during at least the first 2 months she was living in our house. The break with Craig had not been about love for Marcus. It had been a strategic clearing of the field. Craig, when he found out about Marcus, walked away. Marcus, when he found out about Craig, could no longer look at her the same way. What had been between them did not survive the fall. The second, my mother, Miss Gloria, who in the first days had called me asking me to try to understand and not let the family fall apart, found out, through my Aunt Bernice in Greensboro, who heard it from someone who knew Craig, about details I had never made public. About the dinner at Marcus's favorite restaurant while I was sleeping off the medication, about the calls specifically designed to map his vulnerabilities, about the smile in the hospital hallway while I was being wheeled in. My mother did not call to apologize immediately. That is not her way, but she began keeping her distance from Denise with a consistency that said more than any speech. The third, Marcus and Denise never moved in together. What had existed between them survived exactly as long as it remained a secret, which was the only thing feeding it. Without the tension of the forbidden, without the story of the brave woman who risked everything for love, there were just two people who didn't know each other well and who carried between them the memory of what they had done. That weight is real. Meanwhile, I did what I have always done. I worked. I was back at the firm by October of 2023, back with the house in my name. Alan Marsh had that finalized before the end of the year. The accounts separated, the routine rebuilt piece by piece during recovery. Sonia had repainted the living room while I was in the hospital, a warm sage green I had wanted for years, and Marcus had always vetoed. The kitchen was still the kitchen we'd renovated together. The garden was still the garden I'd built. Denise's photo frame was not on the mantle. In its place, I put a small ceramic bowl I'd made in a pottery class I started taking on Thursday evenings, once I was well enough. I need to stop here and talk to you differently for a few minutes. Not about Marcus, not about Denise, about what this kind of betrayal does to a person that nobody else can see. When someone says they were cheated on by their partner, people understand the pain. It's a pain that has a name, that has precedent, that has an entire vocabulary built around it. You lost the love. You lost the trust. You'll rebuild. But when the person who betrays you is your sister, the person who slept in the room next to yours your whole childhood, who shared your mother and your fights and your late-night fears and your first great heartbreaks, who you believe shares a bond with you that cannot be manufactured because it was made from the same blood, the pain isn't about the love you lost, it's about who you are. Because your sister is not just someone you love. She is a witness to your history. She is someone who knew you before you knew who you were going to be. She holds versions of you that exist nowhere else in the world. When she betrays you, she doesn't just take the man. She takes those versions of you. And what remains is a question you cannot stop asking. If she was always capable of this, what was real? The October night she sat with you on the porch steps? The crying when you called with the diagnosis? The 15 years of answering on the second ring? It took me a long time to understand that question is a trap. Not because everything was a lie from the beginning, but because both things can be true at the same time. She loved me and she betrayed me. She had real moments and she made destructive choices. The same person who genuinely cried on the phone in October of 2022 also spent months planning how to occupy the space I occupied. Psychologists have a name for what happens when someone close to you, a sister, a best friend, whoever was supposed to be your safe harbor, uses intimacy as a tool. It's called a trust betrayal, and what separates it from any other betrayal is that it doesn't just damage the relationship, it damages your trust in your own perception. You don't just lose the other person, you lose confidence in your own judgment, your own instincts, your own ability to read what's in front of you. I was a CPA. I had spent 14 years finding the numbers that didn't add up, and I had not been able to find the ones that weren't adding up inside my own house. That is what a sister's betrayal does. It turns the safest place in the world, the bond of blood, the shared childhood, into an archive of evidence you have to go back through with different eyes. And going back through it hurts more than the original discovery. What saved me was not forgetting. It was understanding that my judgment had not failed because I was naive. It had failed because I had placed trust exactly where trust appeared entirely reasonable to place. That is not weakness. That is the cost of loving someone fully. And what I learned, what I would tell any woman going through what I went through, is that the reconstruction begins when you stop asking, "Why did she do this?" and start asking, "What do I need now?" Not because the first question doesn't deserve an answer, but because the answer will never be enough to close what was opened. The answer to the second question can be, you don't rebuild trust in the sister who betrayed you. You rebuild trust in yourself. And that happens in silence, in very small steps, in mornings when you wake up and choose to live one more full day without giving the past the power to define the present. The thing that stays with me from everything I learned, the person who betrays you using your love as a weapon reveals more about themselves than about you. The love you gave was real. What she did with it is on her. Today, recording this, I'm sitting at the kitchen table in the house on the north side of Raleigh. It's a Sunday morning in October, almost exactly 2 years since the surgery. The herb garden in the back is overgrown in a way I've decided I like. My hair came back thicker than before. My last scan was clear. Last Thursday, I was at the pottery class, and a woman I'd just met, she'd started the class after going through her own divorce, watched me center a piece of clay on the wheel, and said she wanted to learn to do it the way I did it, like it looked easy. I told her it took a while, but you get the feel for it. That's the truth about most things worth doing. Marcus signed everything without a fight. The house transferred to my name, deed recorded, finalized before the new year. Sonia and I went to dinner to celebrate, to a place in downtown Raleigh we'd been meaning to try for 2 years, and we ordered dessert before we ordered food because we had earned it. I don't hear from Denise directly. My mom says she's doing okay, still in Charlotte, new job. I don't have anger. I have distance. Those are different things. The framed photograph is in a box in the closet. I haven't thrown it away. I don't know if I will. It has pictures from a childhood that was real, even if the story that came after turned out to be something else. Sometimes I look at the wedding ring, left in a jewelry dish on the dresser after Marcus returned it, and I hold it for a moment. Not with longing, with respect for what that piece of metal meant during a decade of my life, and with a certainty that has grown more solid every day. What is in that dish is the past. What's at the kitchen table, in the herb garden, in the pottery class, in Thursday evenings with Sonia, in the clear scan, that is the present. And the present is mine. If you've been through something like this, if you know what it is to look at your own sister and not recognize who's standing there, write in the comments, "I rebuilt my life and I am still here." You are not alone. And your story of survival matters as much as mine. Tell me, what was the first thing you did for yourself after a betrayal that felt impossible to survive?